I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to Campfire Talk. This is where we sit around the fire, put our feet up with a cold drink, and let the conversation flow. If you're interested in being part of the campfire, contact me at wjevning@gmail.com. It's wjevning@gmail.com and join us around the fire. Well, we're waiting on David. He's going to join us at some point, but Tracy, I told you he's sitting around doing something with that mower.
Probably daydreaming about the next time he's going to use it.
No, but most likely. So everybody, we have a new regular member of our panel, Victoria. Say hello, fellas.
Hey, Victoria, how you doing?
Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey. So I heard David had a cup holder for his chili. Is that true?
A cup holder? Oh, man.
That's
Tracy,
chili.
you got to fill her in.
He's got a cup holder, a plate holder for his sandwiches and chili, a cooler mounted on the back of it for the occasional beer. He's got I think he's got a refrigerator on it too. I'm not sure.
Oh, I
Does
think
he have
so.
a restroom on that thing too, or?
I believe so.
I think he's working on that.
Never has to get off.
Sometimes you got to roll with the pants.
See, that's just what he gets for not showing up on time here. He gets roasted. So what's new, everybody? Silence. I hear crickets.
Oh, just busy. Everybody's cramming in surgeries before the insurance ends out at the end of the year. So we've just been really busy.
Oh, I'll bet.
Weeks.
Tracy, you got a change of hours too, didn't you?
Yeah, they moved me to 410s a while back, and we've been having Fridays off ever since. And starting next week, I have Wednesdays off. So. Oh
man.
Yeah.
That's not like a regular schedule, huh?
Oh, I know it. They don't allow that where I work.
How about you, Victoria?
I'm 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. I tell people I piss people off one house at a time. That's about
Well, I can't sympathize with anybody. I'm retired, so.
Okay, rub it in, Will. Rub it in.
That's right. I will. It's my chance in life to do that.
I bet you're working on your lawnmower too, aren't you?
Oh, hell no. It's parked out there getting rusty.
You have to get Dave on that.
I was gonna see if Donovan could come on, but I forgot he had to go to Seattle to his brother's graduation from Coast Guard Basic.
Oh, hey, wow. There you go. A fellow Coastie. I like to hear that.
Yeah. So I texted Fred in Alaska. He's tied up, so he couldn't join us either. But so it's just us until David gets off his lawnmower.
And now that when I was in the Coast Guard, all they had was basic training in Cape May, New Jersey. They have one in Seattle now?
That's what he said. Yeah, that
would
the military,
be a lot better.
They've moved stuff everywhere, so.
Yeah, I got the shaft on that one. New Jersey?
Yes, you did. You sure did.
Well, Tracy and I, we were both Army, so I was at Knox and you were at Benning, right?
Yes, sir. Oh, it's Fort Moore now. We got to be politically correct.
No, we don't.
Not on this show.
We still say Fort Bragg. We still say Fort Bragg.
Yeah, I joined the Army to go places and see things and everything. I spent a little bit of time at Fort Bragg. Then the next thing you know, I'm back at Fort Benning, which is 40 miles from where I'm born.
They say go places and see things. I went places, but I didn't see much.
Saw a lot of woods.
Yeah. Well, yeah, with us it was armored vehicles, so at least my first couple of years.
Yeah, I spent plenty of time in them things too.
Yeah, no kidding. So we I think we talked. I told you guys about. Well, Tracy, I don't know if we told you much about the stuff we had happen up at the Navajo reservation, but and I don't know if you want to hear about that stuff or not. But
Sure, throw it on me.
And now, John, I think we told you, didn't we?
Well, we talked about the one from the November trip. I don't know if anything else happened beyond that, though.
Well, for Tracy, just a little bit, we went up there for 11 days, me and Adam and Donovan, and because they invited us up there. And we had somebody complain about that, that you shouldn't just go running around, on Indian lands and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, we were invited up there by the Navajo to go do that stuff. So if anybody listening has a complaint about that, we were invited up there. So we went up there, and, the highlights were, I didn't think much of the first few days because we were on the south side of the Chusca Mountains, and it really wasn't any sign or anything going on up there, even though Don talked to some of the local police there, and they said, oh, yeah, go up to this pass, oh, sorry. I thought it was David texting me, but it was a different mower person, so. I'll have to tell him he's got competition out there. But so we went on the north side because we weren't finding anything on the south side. And as soon as we started going into that area, we started finding stuff. And there was at one point, we talked about the animals hanging in trees. We found a skull, a deer skull, 4-point. In the Northwest, they count one side of the antler. So in other parts of the country, they count both. So it would have been an 8-point buck with the antlers stuck into the tree about 7 feet off the ground, facing into the timber. You couldn't have seen it from the road. It just happened that we stopped there, and Don was, he every time we'd stop, he'd get out and go run into the tree line to see if he'd see something. And so we found that. And then there was one night we went 2 hours north on the reservation hour because he got information about one of these things screaming up there. So we drove up there 2 hours, waited around an hour, didn't hear anything, so we drove 2 hours back. We were back at the hotel 8 minutes, and I got a text from Adam saying, come outside. And I'm walking to my door, and before I even got to the door, I could hear this screaming coming through the door. So right across the highway on the mesa, there was one up there screaming bloody murder at Window Rock. So that went on for about an hour. Adam got a bunch of recordings from that. And then we interviewed a family, and in their Hogan, they have a lot of natives that they have, their homes, and then they'll have like homestead property way out. And getting to be that time of year, most people were coming back in, abandoning their places for the winter because they don't want to be up there when they get snowed in. But this family is set up to do kind of year round. So they were up there, and we'd gotten information about their grandfather having a lot of interaction with these things up there. In fact, there was one of them, a regular one, they actually nicknamed it George because they come around so often. So after we interviewed them on camera for the third film we're doing, the father went outside and he did a couple of calls up towards this mesa, and I'll be darned, within a few moments, whistling came down from where he said they were up there, and there was no people up there. We tried to go up there in the daytime, and I could only go so far with the Jeep because the roads were so bad. They were washed out and some really super deep ruts in the middle of them. There was no way of getting up there. So we hiked a little ways in there, but that was interesting. So recently there was a couple of EMTs from just west of there, a few miles, that took a number of pictures of one of these creatures, or a couple of maybe, last summer. So now we're thinking we better plan another trip up there this coming summer.
I didn't hear about this one, Will. So there were a couple EMTs that had a sighting while they were on a run or something, and then they got some.
It's just where they live up there, and and they got. I'll send you a couple of pictures. In fact, send everybody pictures, but they're pretty interesting.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. So
Yeah,
were you able to make out a lot of detail in the pictures, or were they kind of like nighttime, or what?
No, they're daytime. Was that Victoria?
Oh, yeah,
So for someone like me that's never been out west, when you're talking about the lay of the land, what are these locations like that they've had these sightings in?
You know, everybody has their thoughts about the Southwest. I know being from the Pacific Northwest, I always had, you see things on television and in magazines what the Southwest looks like. Everybody thinks desert, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not. Up there, we were a couple hours from Flagstaff, Arizona, so it's up in the northern part of, and we're right on the border of New Mexico and Arizona, so we technically were just barely across the line where Window Rock is in Arizona, but it's heavily forested up there. And I posted Adam, he filmed everything. I mean, every time we were in the Jeep or doing whatever, he had a camera going. And I actually posted one of the little segments. I think it's about 20 minutes worth on the YouTube channel, just to kind of give people an idea of what we were doing and stuff. And I edited out some of the juicy conversation we were having because I wasn't realizing that he was recording. So, I took pieces of things out that probably shouldn't have been said publicly. But none of that lawnmower talk, Tracy, though. It was that kind of stuff.
I get you.
And he didn't have the gimbal on these cameras, so it's, when you see it bouncing around, he was literally bouncing like crazy in the back of my Jeep. So, and the roads were horrible there, but it was, it's beautiful country for these things. I mean, it's forested. There's very few people up there. I did see something that I'd never seen before, and I always kind of, poo-pooed, and I still do for the most part. We're talking about structures because you see all this stuff on social media, and I think 99% of it is human-made. I think it's baloney. Mm-hmm. But we ran into some pinion pickers up there, and that's what a lot of the Navajo do this time of year. They're picking pinion nuts because they can sell them and make some money with them, and they're everywhere. So every time we'd see somebody, Don, he'd, have the Jeep door open and jumping out before I could stop. And he'd run over and talk to people. And there was 2 or 3 people sitting on the left side of the road. And, Adam and I, we waited in the Jeep being polite, and he came back and he says, man, they had a ton of information. Apparently there was a bunch of little spur roads, and all the roads are dirt roads up there. There's nothing improved whatsoever up there. Thank God I had a Jeep because it would have been pretty hard to get around much else. But so they told us they had been up there, and it was just a number of days before this day, and they found these 2 structures off about 100 feet off this little spur road. And they walked over to look at them, and there was a Bigfoot infant laying in the small one. They said it was reddish-brown colored, and it was laying there very still and being very quiet. And then pretty soon Mama parted the brush behind him and was staring at him. They took off running. They had, 5 or 6 people, including small children. So they all got the heck out of there. And they told us how to find the road. And they said, you go up about a quarter mile up that road and you'll see it. So we drove down there, and Don wanted to go into a different direction. So he took off on foot, and then we drove back there, parked the Jeep, and we walked up the road thinking, we want to look very careful. So we got about a quarter mile and there was nothing. So I said, well, shoot, maybe their perception of, distance is off. So I said, let's go ahead and go on up the road. We walked about a mile up that road, and sure enough, we did find a structure, and it was a very rudimentary built kind of a lean-to looking thing. So we went back and talked to them, and then there was a beginning of a second one. So they had said there was 2 structures that were built. So we talked to them again, and they said, we forgot to mention that those 2 structures were torn down and the material scattered. That's why we didn't find them. But we ended up finding this second location, and that's going to be in the film. And I can send you guys pictures of that too. It's very interesting, but it's, you have credible eyewitnesses and you have the physical evidence. So they were very credible people, and I have no reason to disbelieve them, if they actually saw this thing being used by the creature. And then we had found another one in a different, kind of a slightly different area. It was that same part of the mountains, but I sort of dismissed it at first because there was a tree there was a lot of woodcutters up there too. And there was a tree next to this structure that was chopped up. And I thought, maybe they're piling these limbs up like this so they'll dry out and, cure through the winter, and they'll come back next year and they'll collect these up. But then later I thought, we've seen this everywhere up here where woodcutters have been up here, native woodcutters, and they just leave the limbs. They just take the main part of the tree and they leave all the limbs, no matter how big they are. So after we found this one that the witnesses told us about, I thought, well, maybe that's another, because I thought, the Indians were saying that there was an old gray one that lived up there, or a white one, and he said he lives there year round and kills and eats wild horses, which we did find a couple of wild horses that had been killed, and one of them, and this was bizarre. When you drive in there was one place where the edge of the forest was about 100 feet away from the road on our right side. So it's forest, and then you see sections of big pastures, and there's just a ton of lakes up there. And we saw, out of 11 days, at least 100 wild horses up there in different areas. I mean, they were everywhere. So between them and the deer, lots of game. We drove through one day, and then the next day we come in the second time, and there was the bleached skeleton, and it was still articulated. All the bones were still connected. Was 40 feet off the road. And there was no way we could have missed it. So Adam went back and played the previous day's footage. That carcass was not there. It was placed there overnight. So, I mean, there were some bizarre things that happened up there.
Yeah, that is really bizarre to have the whole bone structure together like that and have it had moved, and then moved again. Yeah,
you could see where it had been placed on the grass there. There was no grass growing up through it. It had been placed there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Did
and now
you tell
these
what
structures
killed the horse?
What's that, Tracy?
Did you tell what had killed the horse? I mean,
no, there was only one place. I mean, there wasn't much left of it. It was all bone, except there was still the tail, and there was some skin on the hindquarters. But it was an old kill because the bones were bleached. And in one section of the ribs, I think 3 of them were snapped off. So whether that was the cause of death, I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said they routinely feed off the horses. How fast can a horse run? Because that would tell you a lot about the speed they can go.
Well, these guys are fast. I don't know how exactly fast a horse can run, but we had a guy in Northern California a number of years back. In fact, he was on the show a couple of times, and he clocked one run. And he took me up to the place where this happened. It was this big open pasture area, and there was a fence, a line of fence posts that went through the middle of it. And he said he saw this thing, and he timed it and he showed me the post from the first post and where he stopped timing it to the second one, and he calculated it out at 45 miles an hour.
Wow.
So, and especially now, they're not going to hunt individually. So, if there was, well, I suppose in that case, there could have been one. Of course, they ambush hunt too. And the horses just kind of wander around, through the timber and open areas and everything. They're wild, so there's nothing holding them in. But, and something else interesting about the bones of the articulated one, then we did find another one that was disarticulated back in the forest farther in that same spot. And, normally you'd see scavenger teeth marks on any bones that are left up in the forest. There wasn't one sharp tooth mark on any one of those bones. And I thought that was really odd.
It was odd how it just reappeared overnight.
That was what really threw us. It wasn't there the day before, and it was there the second day. What was there? Therefore, I couldn't tell you. I've never heard or seen anything like that before. But it kind of made me think about that other structure. Well, actually, both of them. If you're going to hunt a big animal and you've got an infant that's that small, and I think that small structure was about 4, maybe a little more than 4 feet across. So I would think that's a pretty small infant, Bigfoot. that was laying in there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to chase down and hunt and kill a big animal, you're not going to want to carry an infant in your arms. So what do you do with it?
Kill it closer.
Exactly. It also suggests too, if you found 3 of such structures, then maybe that gives us a clue as to when they might be mating. You were there in November, so maybe the October, September time frame is when they're actually giving birth.
Yeah, it could very well be.
And these were all on the ground, you said, Will, the structures, the infant structures?
Yeah, they were on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, there was, I was a little bummed that we didn't find more footprints. We did find one line of really good tracks. Unfortunately, it rained pretty hard a couple of days before we got up there, so the detail wasn't great. But the tracks measured 14 inches long, 8 inches across the heel, the ball 5 inches across the heel, and they were 3 inches deep. And the horse tracks near them were maybe an inch deep in that dirt.
Wow.
So that was pretty heavy. Yeah, there was, and just about every person we talked to up in that whole area, that whole time we were there, had at least one sighting.
Will, what do they view them as? In that area, what do they view them as? Flesh and blood, primate?
Oh, they're definitely flesh and blood, and they'll tell you right out they'll eat you. Yeah, they pulled no punches about that.
Will, is there any particular time of year where they have more sightings than other times?
Well, they were saying, like with these pictures, they were saying summertime, and I'm guessing right around June, July time frame. Now, when we were there the very end of September through the first part of October, and they were also saying that time of year, and they actually do a ceremony, and it's a kind of interesting, and I don't have it in front of me, but Don was, he was giving us lessons about Navajo language, so he would always, give us a Navajo name for something, whatever it was we were talking about, and then he'd tell us what it meant. And he was telling us how most Navajo words are actually 3 words. So the name, what they call the creatures, had 3 different portions to it, but the first part was Yeti, just like in the Himalayas, and it means essentially the same thing. So I was kind of blown away by that too. I mean, it was a very interesting place to go to.
Sounds like an interesting place to go back to.
Yeah, no, we definitely have to go back. There's so much going on, and then afterwards we, Don, he's a great dude. He, in fact, he just texted me from Seattle. He would like to come on, but he's up there, with his family. So, one of the things we've been working on is what he's spearheading it, but we're helping him, and that's to get kind of the natives from different tribes sort of together on this stuff. And so he's been talking to people from different tribal groups, and we interviewed an Apache police officer, a week or 2 ago. That's going to be in an upcoming show. And then he had another friend that we're going to be talking to also. So we're kind of branching out into different groups up there, but it's basically all the same kind of stuff. I mean, same kind of stories, and it's no different. The stories aren't different there than you're hearing anywhere else. It's just they're getting a lot of this stuff going on. And I think it's because it's so remote. These things don't really have any human pressure on them up there.
Well, and you mentioned that they said people have been predated and eaten by these creatures as well. Did they say any specific stories about that recently, or was this just something from the old times, or did they mention anything recent?
Well, I believe there were some recent ones, but it was tough to nail people down to talk to them. So we're still waiting on some of that information. But there was one interesting story. So we, and it kind of, I had to laugh sometimes, about the directions we get from people if they're, go down so far on this road and turn left at the big rock and stuff like that, right?
Right.
But surprisingly, their directions were actually very good. So Don got information about this older lady who apparently had a bunch of stories and she was willing to talk about it. So it was that case. They said, you go so many miles up this road and you turn down here and then you turn left at this other place and their house is by this big rock. Well, the big rock turned out to be this big mesa above their house. But there were so few houses up there, we went the directions we got, and we ended up at this particular house. So Dawn gets out, and there was an older lady out there, probably in her 70s, and he was talking to her for the longest time. Then I guess she gave him what for about leaving his friends in the car. So she told him to tell us to come out there and come in the house, and she was super nice. And then her son and daughter were there, and they were both actually military veterans also. He was Navy and she was ex-Army. And they were all willing to talk to us. Well, the daughter, I could tell she must have had something that she had seen, but she was a little more reluctant to talk. She would listen, but I could see her perk up every time, certain things would come up. But the son had his own encounter, and his was interesting. And I don't remember if it was the year before or a couple of years before, but it wasn't a long time before. They'd had a pretty heavy snowfall up there, and it was about 3 feet deep. And apparently a grader had come up there. They said it was very rare a grader would come up there in the wintertime, because once you're snowed in, that's kind of it. But he figured, well, I better, while I have the opportunity, get my truck fired up and go into town for some more supplies. So he said I had a flat tire and I had to carry this 60-pound tank of air, weighed out through 3 feet of snow, and it had already started snowing again when he went out to the truck to air his tire up. Well, once he got out to the truck, he heard this scream. And then he heard it again, and it kept getting closer and louder. So by the time it did it the third time, he says, "Oh, hell no, I'm out of here." And he took off running. He says, "Can you imagine me running?" And he's a runner, so he's in pretty good shape, right? But he said, I'm trying to wade through 3 feet of snow, and more snow's coming down. And then this thing screamed one more time, and apparently it was right at his truck. And he says, it just scared the heck out of me. And I wasn't worried about the truck or the air tank or anything. So,
That's like one of those dreams where you're running in slow motion and you just can't pick up speed.
I hiked up in 3 feet of snow one time up at Mount Hood, and I thought, oh, heck no, I ain't doing this again.
That's great exercise.
But he had one other situation. Now, this was the interesting one. We passed one homestead coming in there on the right. Theirs was on the left, and apparently if you kept following the road, it would go around a bend to the left on the other side of the timber. You couldn't see this third place. And I don't know what the time frame is yet. We're still waiting to hear. And we may have to go back and talk to those people again to find out. But word had got around that one of these creatures was trying to get in at their livestock. And the two guys that were there, they took their rifles and they shot it and killed it. Well, they called the Navajo Rangers. And so, this guy we were talking to, he said, well, he went out anytime they see a strange vehicle up there, which is just about any time, they know who belongs up there and who doesn't. They go out just to see who's there, right? And so he goes out in this field and he sees this official looking truck. And I can't recall if it was Navajo Rangers or if it was Forest Service, but it had a trailer behind it and was towing what he said looked like a really big coffin on this trailer. So he hunkered down, and when he saw it was an official vehicle, he wanted to see what was going on instead of them, questioning him. So he hunkered down in the tall grass and he watched, and the truck went up towards this third house. And after a while, and he waited. So after a while, it came back and apparently had one of these creatures in the box, and it was too big for the box because its head and arm was sticking out over the side of this open thing. And he sat there and he watched it go. And he said it was kind of a light brown color, and he described the hair and all this stuff. And so apparently that's the kind of stuff that goes on up there. But, interesting stuff.
That is really interesting. So I'm presuming these are probably the type 1 creatures?
Yeah, pretty much so, yeah.
Yeah.
Although we did talk to somebody that did see one with canines up there too once, so there may be more than one type in that area.
Interesting. Boy, I'll tell you, to have been up there when that thing got shot, that would have been could have got some good material off of that. What did they say? What time of year that thing was shot?
We don't know.
Mm.
Yeah, they were telling us so much stuff. It was, I felt bad anyway about, trying to be too pushy on asking questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because sometimes, people are so nice, they'll have you come back,
Right, exactly.
Well, just an observation, if they showed up with something that was large enough to hold one and it was similar to a coffin, it would almost lead you to feel like they were prepared for those incidents.
Yeah, they knew what they were coming for, apparently.
It says a lot to me.
Well, they were, the hotel we were staying at, there was a building right next to it, it was kind of an L-shaped situation. So, we were on one side and this apparently was an office building on the other side of us. And Window Rock's a pretty small place. So the police are there doing some kind of training for a few days. So there was a bunch of different cops that were going in there, different uniforms. So Don talked to a couple of the guys that were locals, local police there, and they were the ones that were telling us, oh yeah, if you want to see the creatures, you go up to this area, and that's where, we found the horse carcass and all this other stuff.
Well, I'll tell you, they must be getting desperate if they're eating horse meat, because I've had horse and that is not very good.
Well, these things, they're wild, so they're going to eat whatever's available to them. They're not that picky. Yeah. They eat garbage, so I mean,
that's true.
They're not too fussy.
Horse is loaded with vasculature and good nutrients, but boy, I'll tell you, it's strong.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you something that was interesting too. We would. I kind of like to run my operations in two shifts. We'll search areas during the day because these guys are up in their sleeping areas in the daytime for the most part. And then at night, we'll just go out where, we're not in their areas, but where we can hear if anything's going on from those areas. So we would drive out after dark, usually, 8, 10 o'clock at night, and along all the paved highways, when you get away from the town, that's where you'd see all the deer. They were all hugging the paved highways. I mean, there was a big buck. One time we thought we were going to hit him because his front feet were on the white line on the right side of the road. And he wasn't moving. And it wasn't just one or two deer. They were in clusters. Sometimes you'd see 6 or 8 of them in a group, and usually, 3 or 4. But there was tons of deer. You'd see, 20, 25 deer along a highway where we went out, and but they were all right there on the highway, which I thought was kind of bizarre. Yeah, very unusual. It wasn't hunting season or anything.
A lot safer for them by the highway than in the woods.
Well, that's true, and it was a fairly busy highway too, so that's what kind of made me think too it was odd because, with that kind of traffic, why were they hanging around the highway?
Exactly.
Because they saw what happened to the horse.
That could be, sure.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. It was perfect country. I mean, there was a place, that particular area, so many small lakes up there, just dozens and dozens of them. But it was cold up there at night too. We got down to the 20s. We got up there one time and we were freezing our backsides off. So we're like, oh man, we got to dress a little bit warmer for the next day. And there were still patches of snow in areas up there. But, like I said, we only saw tracks. I don't think there was a huge amount of activity up there that time of year. I think they were in a different area, but, because there should have been, if they were there, you would have seen tracks everywhere. I mean, the dirt was perfect everywhere for them. So, but it was interesting.
Now, was the ground frozen, or was it? Well, there was snow on the ground. Was it frozen?
It could have been frozen at night. We thought about that about a week after we were there. I kept thinking, man, I told the guys, we should be seeing tracks up here. But after Don mentioned, it's been, this temperature, I thought, oh, well, we're not seeing a lot of game sign up here either. We're seeing deer and stuff, but we're not really seeing a lot of tracks. Now, it's funny, on the south side of the Chuskas, we found lots of bear tracks. We found lots of cougar tracks. I mean, I've never been in a place where I saw more cougar tracks in an area. But on the north side, there was no game sign at all up there. But that's where we saw the Bigfoot sign.
That's where you had the scream?
Not the scream. Well, let me think. I'm trying to think. That was a different area where the whistling came from. Oh no, the screams came from by the hotel.
Right, the hotel area. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big mesa. In fact, Don had been telling us in the town of oh shoot, why can't I think of it? It's the one Gallup. Where they do the polling, Gallup poll. Oh yeah. Gallup is about 30 miles from there. In fact, you have to drive right through Gallup to get to Window Rock from the way I came. They had what was going on at that time, the Gallup Screamer. Well, apparently the mesa where these screams came from runs down that direction. So, the locals were saying, oh yeah, every periodically we got one or two that'll go up and come up that mesa and they'll give the town hell for a while, then they'll wander on off a different direction. And the only thing over there was like an interpretive center on the other side of the highway, and that was pretty much it. So, I mean, it was pretty amazing. It was loud, and there was even people in the town around there trying to, revving motors loud and honking horns and things to get them to shut up.
Jeez. Yeah, there's not too much else that could be. You can't blame that on a bear or a cougar.
No, it wasn't anything like that.
Do they have a lot of missing persons there? Did you go into that?
Well, Don looked it up. I think on the reservation there's around 750 people that have vanished.
Wow.
Now, obviously, it's not all Bigfoot, but some of those are going to be.
700 unsolved missing people. That shouldn't.
That's a bunch.
That's a tragedy.
Yeah, especially for a remote area where there's not that many people,
Yeah, exactly.
750 missing in New York City wouldn't be that much of a dent in the population, but out there, that's a big dent.
I had to laugh at Don. He cracked me and Adam up. Me and Adam, of course, we don't know what to expect. We'd never been there before. And Don lives over on the other side of the reservation where it's more desert-like. So he drove about as far as we did to get to Window Rock, but he knew the area pretty well. And he was saying that we went out to this one lake the first night we were there. So we're driving about 30 miles out to get out to this place, right? And we get almost there, and he starts telling us about, well, there's no law out here. The police don't come out in this area, and there's a lot of crackheads, and there's this, and there's that, and these people will pull you over and rob you. And we're like, Don, what'd you bring us out here for? We nicknamed it Crackhead Lake because we're not going to Crackhead Lake anymore, Don.
Maybe Sasquatch isn't the biggest thing to be afraid of out there.
I said, I'd really like to know these things before we decide to go to a certain area.
Right. Wow, that sounds pretty intense.
It was. So, Tracy, Victoria's never heard your account.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you should tell her. I told her it was very interesting.
I brought some popcorn just for you, man.
Okay, well, I used to deliver magazines all over the Southeast. I covered Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, Florida, and I had dedicated routes. So every 3 weeks I would run, another route. Well, one of my routes, I was leaving North Alabama, Florence, Alabama. I was headed to Bolivar, Tennessee is the town I was headed to, but to get there I had to go to Corinth, Mississippi, and then turn north. Well, just after I crossed the state line into Mississippi, I was in Tishomingo County. In fact, where this happened, I could see Tishomingo County High School because it's a really great, big, brand new school, sitting right off the main highway. Well, the serpentine belt on my truck broke, And we'd been having storms all day long. In fact, that whole week had been really rough weather-wise. And I knew the belt broke. I knew what had happened as soon as it went because that was the problem we had with those vehicles we used. So I just pulled over on the side of the road and called my boss. And he hooks me up with a tow truck. And I got about an hour and a half to wait before that guy can get there. So I decided, well, I'm going to get in the back of the truck here. And it's a big cargo van is what it was. And start pulling orders and getting everything situated, you know. It was kind of hot.
Wait. You're the white van guy. You peed on the Bigfoot.
Yes, ma'am.
You are famous. You are a legend in the Bigfoot world.
And not just for long.
I don't know Tracy. About famous, but yeah, I did. If I didn't pee on him, I peed right at his feet. So.
Talk about unlucky. No,
yeah, Tracy.
Go ahead.
I heard your encounter the first time, Tracy, and I thought it was just absolutely magnificent, terrifying, captivating, all those things at the same time. It's one of my favorites.
Dude, I'm going to tell you, it changed my whole outlook on a lot of things. I mean, I wouldn't go out in the woods anywhere. I wouldn't do a lot of the things that I used to enjoy doing. And it took a lot of, I don't know what you'd call it, but I had to get back into doing these things because it was ruining my life, you know. So I had to make myself. And when I'm out fishing or hunting right now, if it gets too quiet, I gets kind of spooked and I have to leave, you know. But I'm back out camping, hunting, fishing, you know. In fact, I got a hunting trip planned for next weekend. So.
Well, I am so sorry I interrupted you. I want to hear this story from you because that is the most amazing, and you're like a legend to me. You are.
I'm just plain old Tracy.
Tracy, you peed on a Bigfoot, bro.
I wouldn't recommend anybody trying that. I mean, really.
Sir, there's marking your territory, and there's marking your territory. I think
and they do not like it when you do that.
I wouldn't like it either. Pee on my feet, I'll fix you.
Hey, I tell you what, if it'd been the other way around, he could pee on me all he wanted to. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
I'll let that go.
So when they opened the door, if I remember right, you were looking right on them, or they were coming up on you.
I had the cargo door on the side open because the way the rain was coming from, it was hitting the other side of the van, and it was really hot in there. So I stood up to pee out the door, and when I did, I heard a noise, so I stuck my head out, and I was looking right in his face.
Oh, my God.
From about 12 inches away, you know.
And Tracy, just so I can refresh my memory, because I love hearing your description, tell me again how the facial expression looked and what the face looked like, because I remember you talking about this before, and I was really captivated by it.
He looked really angry. The face looked kind of like that picture that Ben Vendramini drew about what he thought Neanderthals looked like.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference was it didn't have cat eyes. It had regular eyes. You know, they were huge, you know, really wide mouth, really wide, like a straight line from one side of his face to the other, you know. The nose was kind of flat, but not exactly like a gorilla's nose, you know, just kind of flattened out. You could see a lot of the skin on his face, but he also had a lot of hair on his face, kind of wispy, like a beard, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And his teeth looked like they were as big as chiclets. I mean, they were just huge teeth. And yeah, he did not look happy. In fact, I think he growled at me. I just was too shocked at that time to realize, and I was trying to process what I'm looking at. You know, what in the hell is this?
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, when he stuck his head in the van, I had fell backwards up against the driver's seat. I kept the pistol hanging on the side of the seat. And he stuck his head in, and I managed to get my hands on the pistol. And when I pointed it at him, he got this look on his face. His eyes got real big, like, oh, crap. And when he did that, that was the only time I ever saw the whites of his eyes, was when he got them real big, you know. And he turned, and, well, he made a really loud whoop sound inside the van. I mean, it literally rattled the panels on the inside of that truck. And he just turned and he turned away from the door. That's when I scrambled up, because I was trying to shoot, but I didn't. I had the damn safety lock on. And when I managed to figure out what was going on with my pistol, and I stood up, I jumped over to the door, and I looked, and I saw him and 3 others running toward the wood line. Now, I didn't see the other 3 until that moment. 2 were coming from toward the rear of the van. 1 was coming from toward the front of the van, but they were all headed toward the wood line. And I just kind of emptied my pistol in their direction. So, but yeah, that's he was in control of everything until I pulled the pistol out, and that's when he got worried. It looked like
he knew what it was.
I think if he didn't know exactly what it was, he knew it was dangerous to him.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's a terrifying encounter. I can't imagine what you went through.
But you had to wait there in the rain for how much longer? I could not imagine the intense.
Actually, because I had shut the truck off as soon as it happened, I knew. I slammed all the doors, and I jumped up in the driver's seat, and I knew there was a gas station about 7 or 8 miles down the road, I think, a place called Burnsville, Mississippi. So I cranked it up, and I drove to Burnsville, Mississippi with nothing but, flashers on. No wipers, no nothing, As soon as I pulled into the parking lot of that gas station, the truck kind of sputtered and died right there. That's when I called the boss and told him, look, I've moved the truck because I didn't like sitting on the side of the road like that. I didn't tell him why. And he said, he gave me the tow truck driver's number, said call him and let him know that you moved, where you moved to. Well, when I called that guy, he answered the phone. He said, oh, that's cool. He said, I'm about 15 minutes from there, so I'll be there in just a minute. So I went in the gas station and got me a drink and just trying to calm my nerves a little bit, and here he comes driving up just a few minutes later. But I had been on the side of the road probably for close to an hour when that happened.
How could you even formulate a thought at that point, much less a sentence? It's beyond me. I bet you drove that thing like you stole it, didn't you?
I did. I did.
Wow.
But that's what amazed me is what I broke down. Like I said, I could see Tishomingo County High School. It's at night. They've got a whole bunch of those parking lot lights around the school, and I could actually see them. I was within a mile of the school where this happened.
So is that a real wooded area, Tracy, or is that fairly, are there lots of buildings and structures, or?
It's mostly all woods. You don't see too many buildings except like in small towns or like around the school. You got the school, which it's a big campus, so there's a lot of buildings around that school there. But yeah, it's a big 4-lane highway. I believe it's Highway 71 or 72. Look on an atlas from Florence, Alabama to Corinth, Mississippi. That's the highway that I was on.
Yeah. I know the first time I heard your story was several years ago, and that was the first thing I did was look at a map, and I thought, maybe I'll go look out there and, see what it's like and find out if anybody else has had any sightings out there. There has to be a population of them there somewhere. I mean, for 4 of them to have been there like that.
I've heard of a lot of sightings in that area.
Yeah.
Especially around the Burnsville area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've
Coonbo, you ever heard of him?
Mississippi before.
Heard of who?
Coonbo. Can't remember his real name.
Yeah, I've heard of him. Yep.
Baker, Coonbo Baker.
Baker, yeah. He actually lived, or his family's farm is not far from Florence, Alabama, where he had his encounter.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I was probably, I can't remember exactly, but I was probably 30 miles away from Florence on the highway when this happened.
Yeah, so that is a pretty big area for them then.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
72, that's a 2-lane road?
It's 4-lane.
4-lane? Wow.
Yeah. It's actually like an interstate. It's got a divided highway.
Oh, okay. Mississippi's got some strange things going on there. But it's perfect habitat.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of rivers and streams around there. Matter of fact, I had just crossed a bridge right about maybe 2 minutes before that belt broke on the truck.
Yeah, I remember your story. You hear a lot of stories, and your story is one of those that have always stayed with me. I could not imagine. I remember thinking, oh boy, not only opened the door and tinkled on one, but he was face to face with one. And then, oh man, you need a t-shirt for that one, sir. I mean, much respect.
Believe it or not, other than, with the group that I'm, Will and a few other people, I really don't speak of it very much. I don't tell too many people.
Well, I mean, I'm picking with you, but that's pretty intense. It really is.
Oh, I understand. I mean, I've got some friends that heard it and figured out who I was, just by some of the things I said. So, yeah,
Yeah, you gotta be careful. You don't want too much fame.
Yeah, no, especially not for that.
Yeah,
right.
And there's so many people, crappy people in this subject that'll, they'll just say stupid things.
That's one of the reasons I don't talk about it a lot, because we caught a lot of crap, which you did too, Will. And
oh yeah,
we all caught a lot of crap from that. So that's when I decided, I'm just not gonna, I'll talk to the people I've talked to, like you, and Shannon, and
well, the people
a few
that
other
spewed all
people,
that,
Coonbo I've talked to, but
the
other,
people that
I don't.
Spewed that negative stuff are hoaxers themselves anyway. So I don't even give them any kind of credit.
Tracy, how long did it take you to get back out there?
So you're talking about back out in the woods and everything?
Just have some form of security, because there's someone out there that's had an experience that's just, shut down. What would you tell them?
Oh, it took me years to get over it. I mean, to get back to where I could live my normal life. I'm talking 2 or 3 years at least. And one of the things that helped me is that I took a job. I had moved to Ohio for a while, but there was a job that I had been trying to get down here for several years. Well, after I moved to Ohio, I got a phone call from a representative from that company saying that, hey, we'd like to talk to you. I said, well, I've moved to Ohio. They said, oh my goodness. So I was really interested in the job. So I said, well, I was planning to go visit family next week anyways. So I could, come by there sometime. And, it worked out. I ended up getting that job and moving back down here. My job was a superintendent over this company, does maintenance and construction work for a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer location. Maintaining the park, the campgrounds, stuff like that, And
you have interesting things that happen there too.
Oh yes. That's one of the things that kind of helped me get over it, dealing with some of the people and the stories that I heard up there. But a lot of the time I would be miles away from anywhere, going to a park where some of the crew had worked on, let's say, a building, because I would have to go do a pre-inspection before the Corps of Engineer inspector himself, came to check it out and everything. So I'd be out there by myself. There may be a few, civilians in the park here and there, but I ended up having to spend a lot of times out in places out in the woods by myself, And there were sightings around there. That was one of the things that we had to do, because we drove vehicles that looked kind of official. Whenever we pull into a park, sometimes if something happened, civilians would come up to us, hey, we need help, this and this happened, Well, we would call the park rangers and they would come take care of it most of the time. But there were papers that we had to fill out, like for animal attacks or animal encounters, people, because they wanted to know if they were rabid animals and stuff like that. So we would have to fill these things out. Well, during my orientation, which lasted about a month, the guy that was training me, he was actually retiring, and I was taking his job. He, one of the papers, had animal encounter report. There was another one that looked almost the same that said strange animal encounters. And I asked him about that. I was holding them side by side. What's the difference? Well, that one's for like when a raccoon, a fox, or an animal, approaches a group of people, something like that, or, any kind of stuff like that. This one is for what they would call unknown animals. I said, what do you mean, like Bigfoot? He said, don't laugh, you'd be surprised. I said, oh, okay, But yeah, and there have been, if you look on the BFRO site for places in Georgia, Carrollton, Georgia, around that area, that is all right around where that Corps of Engineer property is.
Which part of Georgia did you mention, Tracy?
Town called Carrollton, LaGrange.
Carrollton. Yeah, I get to Georgia fairly frequently. Is that up by the North Georgia mountains? I know I've heard the name Carrollton, but I can't picture where it is.
It's in west central Georgia. It's right on the state line, or close to the state line of Alabama.
Okay, yeah. So I got you. I know where you're at. That is a very remote area.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of, big wild woodlands, and the federal government owns a lot of it. So there won't ever be any development and stuff like that in those areas.
When you look at, you had two sets of paperwork, one for unknown and one for regular animal attacks, because I worked animal services for 5 years. And so I kind of get why you have to do that. But when you're all the way in Georgia and you've got two sets of paperwork, and then you've got Will and Don over here, across the country, and they have vehicles prepared to carry these things away, something's going on behind the scenes. Somebody knows something and they're tracking it.
Yeah, because these papers weren't for our company. These were turned over to the Corps of Engineers people. In fact, the superintendent's office, from what I understand, or the superintendent of that project, his office. But yeah, and there were places up there around that place where, we were specifically told by the government, don't go there. Don't even go around that building. I mean, they'd be building with, razor wire around it, way back off down a little paved road, and it's like, what is this? There'd be no windows or anything. They'd say, I'll just stay away from there. And it had big signs on it, U.S. government property, do not, no trespassing. So
you can see how that ties into the guy that we interviewed that was the mortuary affairs officer in the Army, retired captain, who saw all those records about the creatures killing soldiers.
Oh yeah. Yes.
See, this stuff, if you can link all these things together.
And I'll tell you something else too. While I was there was a couple of reports in the strange animal category, and whenever that happened, they would close that particular part where this happened. And within days, there would be civilians, with government IDs roaming around looking through those parks.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the word, hey, open that park back up.
Well, we got a couple of minutes left, guys. I went to text David, and all he
fell
sent
asleep
me was
on the lawnmower.
Well, he sent me a picture of him driving away with the mower and a beer in his hand.
Oh yeah, see, I knew there was a beer in there somewhere.
So he's listening.
Chili.
Yep.
Well, do you mind hitting on those reports where the soldiers were killed, or do we have time for that?
Let's do that next time.
Okay.
We're just about out of time now. Anybody got anything before we wrap it up for this session?
I've
No, I think
enjoyed
it's a
it.
good talk. Yeah.
Oh, Victoria, give out your information on your podcast.
Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show. I touch on everything from flesh and blood to the woo. If you have a story, I'm open to listen to it. It's not an interview, it's a conversation.
How can they get a hold of you?
Not So Perfect Bigfoot.com, NSPB, NSP Bigfoot at gmail.com. I had to think about that for a moment.
Well, you send me that, and I'll put it in the description for each show we do. And in the intro, I put in that, if anybody out there listening, if you want to join us for one of these, chats around the fire, get a hold of me and let me know, and we'll include you in. You're more than welcome. All right, guys. Well, I think that'll do it for this time. Join us again next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.